So, I don't know if you can see down in there, but it's got some articulation on the side that kind of break things up, even though it's a real narrow space in between structures. Okay, there's another example, sort of what you guys were looking at, the rooftop deck, second floor plus a rooftop deck on a 30-foot wide lot. Still pretty massive looking, and you can see how it kind of sticks out relative to everything else. It's like very little articulation on the side. Pretty flat wall. More examples. A little bit different architectural style. I don't know if you can see this or not, but this is essentially what the south side of the building is going to look like. Although this is only 2 stories, yours is going to be 3. But if you don't develop some articulation in that architecture, it's going to be very flat and very massive. You can't really even see how massive this is in through here because it's such a tight setup between buildings, but yours is going to peer out above a 1-story. It's just going to, that big old flat wall is just going to stick out like a sore thumb. Alright, so there's an example of how to develop some kind of articulation on the sidewall so it's not so flat and it looks a lot more broken up, and you can see the structure doesn't look as massive as it is otherwise. Next door, very similar, same kind of deal. You see the wall's not flat, it's got a lot of movement in it with windows, balconies, a little bit of hip tile, some accents, different roof lines, all that kind of stuff to try to break up the massiveness looking of the building. And again, you got to realize this is 2 stories essentially with little loft spots. Your structure is 3 stories, so imagine that whole 2nd story, another story up, plus the roof deck. It's really tall. I mean, I'm talking like the top of the building is gonna be 50 feet. It's the same structure, kind of a pan. So you can see there's a roof deck on the back of this thing and on the front. So that's a roof deck up there with a loft going into it, and this is a roof deck on the back. Again, narrow, long, only 2 stories with loft spots. So see how that's broken up? Looks a lot nicer than a big old flat wall. Rears of the same structures. In an alley setup, so not that attractive. Your rear structure actually is the front of the building in terms of its entrance, so maybe you want to do something a little bit nicer. Okay, here's another example of articulation to break up a massive building. Again, 2 stories, pop-up lofts, roof decks, but you can see again the use of steps in the building, railing, pilasters, recessed windows, planter boxes, nooks, different roof lines, all that kind of stuff. Breaks up the architecture. In the rear, I do like maybe the top of that, the railing and the pilasters on the roof deck there. That looks kind of nice, especially with the hip roof coming down beside it. Something to think about. Okay, here's the same structure. Again, giving you an idea how to break it up. Just got to add lots of elements in it to visually break up the massiveness of that wall. Imagine if that thing was just one big flat wall. I mean, it would just stare right at you. But here, visually, it's a little bit more appealing. And the front. 35-foot wide lot. This structure's got a different way of handling it, a little bit of articulation, not a lot. It's got a landscape solution with planters, which might be a way to handle it in our case. in Costa Rica to break up the flat wall with landscaping. Something to think about, but I think a combination of the two. You can see this is a pretty big flat wall here. Not a whole lot going on to it visually, but the trees, the planters, fairly narrow planter. I'd say it's only 6 feet wide, is breaking it up pretty good. Still, it's got like roofline articulation in it. Try to help it out, but you can see the wall itself isn't got as much movement going on with it. Still kind of works. And the rear. Here's another example. Some other stuff to look at. Same, more of the same. In and out movement of the wall, articulation of the window treatments, little balconies, faux balconies, stuff like that, columns, a little bit of landscaping to break it all up. It still has that roof deck element right there. There's another one. See the articulation here? Not so much. And I'd say that's pretty close to what you're going to be looking at, except for the fact that it's going to have one more story on top. So it'll be that much bigger, that much more massive looking. And just a matter of what you're looking at. But I think something like that, 3 stories, staring down the beach in Hermosa, is going to stick out pretty obviously. It's just an idea from the front of this one. This is kind of a good example of a big flat wall. There's a site next door that's under construction, so you get a better view of what a big flat wall looks like with nothing on it. That is 3 stories, full 3 stories right there, sort of in the middle of the building, so you can see how tall that is. So here's extreme articulation, 2 different craftsman style and I don't know what you call that style of building, but it massively articulates this side of this building and cuts everything up. So not the style that you guys are looking for, but I mean, you get the idea of how much movement it takes to break up that big giant building. I mean, I'm literally like 30 feet away from this thing.